Hi, I'm Angel with All Free Sewing and FleeceFun.com. Today I'm going to show you how to make a cute cowl capelet, perfect for fall. For this project, you will need the following items. You'll need 1.5 yards of fleece, and you might need a little bit more or a little bit less. 1.5 yards of fleece works for a medium-sized cowl with a doubled collar. If you're going to just make a single collar or your size is larger than that, you will probably need more or less fleece depending on it. So please just pull out the pattern and measure it yourself and decide how much fleece you'll need just to be on the safe side. You also need thread, of course, scissors, and the assembled PDF pattern. To get the PDF pattern, go to fleecefun.com, find the cowl capelet, click on that. Once you find that, find the pattern envelope, click on that, and that will download the PDF for you to print out. For more instructions on how to assemble the PDF, please visit fleecefun.com's channel. Alright, now that you have all those things, it's time to start cutting out the pattern. Now you'll need to decide if you want an extra thick collar or just a single thick collar. Now in the example, it is a double thick collar, and I will tell you it is quite warm. It's probably not something you're going to want for light fall weather, that's more late fall winter. So decide how much of the fabric you're going to need to cut out, if you're going to need to double up on the collar or not. So you're going to, first of all, cut 2 of the capelet. Now you'll notice that there is the back side of the capelet and the front side, and it's all used on one pattern piece. So what I recommend doing is doubling up on the fabric, depending on the size, and cutting it out. Once you've done that, cut out the scoop part of the capelet. That's going to be the front part. So then just take one of those pieces and cut out that scoop. And then you should have one piece that is flat on top and one piece that has a scoop on top of the capelet. Once you have that, set that aside, and it's time to cut out the collar. If you're doing a double collar, doubly thick, you're going to need to cut 2 of the front and 2 of the back. And it's the same thing as we just did with the capelet. You have one pattern piece that actually cuts out 2 different ways. So in the example, I made a double thick collar, so I cut out 2 of the front side, that's the part with the curve, and then you're going to trim the pattern down, and you're going to cut out 2 of the back side, and that again is for a double thick collar. If you're making a single thick collar, you're going to cut out 1 of the front side, so 1 with the curve, and then 1 of the back side, 1 with the straight. Alright, now that you have all your pattern pieces, it's time to start sewing. We're going to begin with the capelet. So taking the 2 capelet sections that you have, place them right sides together and pin each side of it. You can see what I'm talking about in the pattern example. Once you pin each side, and make sure that they line up correctly because it is an asymmetrical line on the bottom. Pin each side, and then you're going to sew each side using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, making sure you leave the bottom and the top open. Once you've done that, set the capelet part aside. It's time to start on the collar. Now for the double thick collar, what you're going to do is you're going to take your 2 front pieces and you're going to place them right sides together. Once you've done that, you're going to pin the top, and you're going to sew it using a 1/2 inch seam allowance the top. Once you've done that, you're going to take your back side and again pin it at the top. You can see what I'm talking about in the pattern example, with right sides together, and then you're going to sew using a 1/2 inch seam allowance along the top. Now it's time to sew the front of the cowl to the back of the cowl. So what you're going to do is you're going to place them right sides together, and they won't line up perfectly because you have the front with a curve and you have the back with the straight line. You just want them to meet at the corner right there and pin it so it'll start kind of making a diamond shape to the other side. You're going to make sure that you leave both ends open. Then, using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, sew along that side. Now it's time to make it a total tube. So you're going to go to the other side and you're going to pin it using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and again leaving the ends open using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You're going to sew that side. So now you have a really big tube. All right, now that you have this huge collar, it's time to fold it in half. Now before you do that, I recommend there are certain intersections where there's a lot of fabric bunched up. You're going to want to trim that. Just trim it down so it will lay nicely. Trim that down. Now you've got this long tube, turn it right side out. Now that it's right side out, you need to fold it in half. So you want the curved sides to meet, so curve to curve, straight to straight, fold it in half. So the seam is basically your fold line. Once you've done that, I recommend pinning that on the double thick collar. And what you're going to do is you're going to sew a basting stitch about a 1/4 inch in from the edge of the fabric all the way around. The basting stitch is important because it will make it easy to attach the collar to the capelet. So what you need to do is just pin the bottom. So you have wrong side to wrong side. You're going to pin the bottom and just do a basting stitch, which is just a really long straight stitch, just to make it stay so it'll lay nicely and it'll make it really easy to attach to the capelet. Now that's for a double thick collar. Single thick collar, much easier to do. What you're going to do is you're going to take your front side of the cowl and the back side of the cowl and you're going to place them right sides together. Then you're going to sew, then you're going to pin each side, leaving the top and the bottom open. You're going to pin each side and then sew it using a straight seam and a straight stitch and a 1/2 inch seam allowance along each edge. All right, now that you've done that, it's time to turn under the top part of the cowl to make it look nice. So turn it under a 1/2 inch and then pin it. After you've done that, sew using a zigzag stitch right along the edge of the fabric all the way around just to make it look nice. All right, once you've done that, whether you've done a single thick or a double thick collar, it's time to attach it to the capelet. So whether you have a double thick collar or a single thick collar, the process is the same. What you're going to do is you're going to take your capelet and you are going to turn it right side out. Okay, so the seams are on the inside, the fabric is right side out. What you're going to do is you're going to take your collar and you're going to line up the lines. So the curved down part is going to match up with the front of the curved down part of the capelet. So front side to front side, back side to back side. And what we do is we want the seam to actually be on the outside and the collar is going to cover it. That way you don't have the seam rubbing against your neck. It'll just make it a lot more comfortable for you. All right, so what you're going to do, and you can see it better in the example, is you're going to pin. So if you're using the single thick collar, it's going to be right side to wrong side of the capelet. If you're using the double thick collar, it's right side no matter what you do, so it'll also be right side to wrong side. And you're going to pin that all the way around. All right, now it's time to sew the collar onto the capelet. Sewing slowly because you want it to look nice, and if you're using a double collar, it can really be a lot of fabric you're dealing with it and you don't want it to bunch up underneath the needle. So take your time, start at a shoulder seam and using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, sew all the way around and attach your cowl to your capelet. Great, you're almost done, just one more step. What you're going to do is you're going to turn under that bottom edge of your capelet a 1/2 inch and using a zigzag stitch, sew it all the way around just to finish it off and make it look really nice. And that's it, you're finished. You have a great capelet that looks great with jeans, it looks great for a formal night out on the town. It is a very versatile and warm and comfortable thing to wear for fall. If you like this pattern, you might also like the ribbon hat pattern. That pattern is free and available on fleecefun.com. You might also like our scarf pattern, candy stripe scarf pattern. So cute and fashionable. For more great patterns and tutorials, you can visit allfreesewing.com. You can also visit my website, fleecefun.com. All my patterns are free as well. Have a great day, and remember, velvet is pretentious. Fleece is fun.